Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Ex-Classmates. 3 your true enemies. Talk about for true enemies here. And I was working on placing some my Photoshop work here just to kind of show right here. And I'm sure most of us have seen some examples right here. I talk about for for true enemies. And I know for any classmates that we may met at one time, if it's going to be what you call like any examples of what you call a message in a bottle or something like that, anything about source of education. But just to understand a little bit about our ex friends, if it's going to be what you call people that we met at one time and then we reconnect with them at some point a time as well. Have I here for ex classmates 3, I talk about for true enemies right here, and then have I here's the for what the Bible says as well, and then have here some of the work, artwork I with him put together right here. I talk about for true enemies. And if anybody were warrant or that, what does it basically mean to have what you call like a true enemy? And have right here for like meeting classmates and then meeting with classmates. So if students were to be what you call meeting each other at the beginning, on the playground, maybe if it's early years, like maybe during recess time, or if it's anything maybe at the local parks or somewhere like that, that you're going to be meeting classmates. And one of these, what you call one of these classmates, that would be talking to you, and at some point of time that they could be what you call maybe something what you call that your enemy, somebody that that really you didn't really get along with very much of the time, or if it was anything about if they were mistreating you or bullying you around or so. And we were toward that. What does the Bible usually say about that? Is to where that if we're going to be coming into a situation to where that we meet the other kids, other people who think that they are better than somebody else, and so they sometimes I guess how we describe true enemies. And one way that Mike, if anybody weren't toward it, but for knowing about for what the Bible says about that, about talk about for true enemies, and what are true enemies? What are enemies? Basically, is that they are what's called people that one what you call it, that they think that they have that it is basically mean is to where they have more power. They feel like they are smarter than somebody else, that they can take whatever they want. And I know that sometimes people probably say that they may have enemies. They may make what you call the source of enemy. Or the fact about that, for how they were mistreated, or that they continue to take up to steal from you. And I know like with anybody that they're likely weren't, or that sometimes you're going to have what you call this enemy is to where that somebody that wants to take advantage of you, somebody that what you call abuses you, and they steal from you, and so you're like one thing about as to where from what the Bible says about that. And that I'm sure that a variety of like different examples of true enemies that I can I was also thinking about to where that I did not want to include all the weapons or anything such as what you call your military machinery, any type of weapons or some sort. Mainly it was like powers. And this right here, the way I drew this right here, with this, this enemy would have like what you call certain powers, as to where that, yeah, that, anybody who's going to be going to school, and maybe if they're going to be in music class, that they meet somebody, and there's somebody that they think that they're a little bit, they're better than somebody else, and so they want to what you call, act like what you call act tough, and they want to, have something against, you, or, this person who's being bullied around. And so that's just the thing that during that class that you may have been yelled at a couple of times, and you may have what you call been mistreated a lot of times too. And after you meet up with them about 5 years later or so, maybe 10 years later, and then that's whenever that people are like warned toward it that you have right here, do not disturb, such as that this was right here. If I were to be in that moment to where that after about maybe 5 or 10 years later, from whenever the story reconnects, especially to where you reconnect with a friend that you used to know at one point in time, and they were what you calls like they you thought they were abused you, or if it was anything about that they were stealing from you, or something that came up to where that you just didn't really want to talk about it. So that's just the thing about it, is to where whenever we're young and just kind of getting to know our classmates as to where what does it usually mean to have a true enemy. And this person that you're like weren't, or that at one point of time that you met them and you were talking to them, and some point of time that you could have been talking to him without not even knowing about it. And these people is like, oh, yeah, that if they know you, that you what you call you are new to that school district, or you are very new to the job, they think that you have something that maybe that they don't, and so they want to take that what you have. And we may think that maybe a bill could maybe be what you call a true enemy or a true attacker or something like that. But anything about what you call attacking someone and then knowing about for anything based on for true enemies. And so you have right here, this right here would be an example right here of like a message in a bottle, and talk about for your meeting classmates. So you use right here is like the zoom right here, and work the zoom control right here. But the way I think about though is like talk about for true enemies, and really that we may have some of the classmates that we went to school with that you're like thinking that to were that during it, it's like if you're going to be at the local parks or recreation centers that you may meet somebody, and let's just say the story comes to where that yeah that besides what you call like whenever these kids they grow up and then they have their own kids, and one of those to where that people that they meet up with, and thinking about is to where that yeah that it's if it's going to be maybe the son or daughter that is what you call is that the children of somebody that was one time was you thought that was what you call that was considered your enemy. And one of those reasons could have been is to where that yeah that during that time, oh yeah, nearly 12 years ago that that they stood you up or they set you up for something, or anything about maybe at the party or at the casino or somewhere like that. And so you're like one toward these classmates, or maybe if it's co-workers. And I know some people are saying that people that you used to work with, after you meet up with them after about maybe 10 years later, and you're like one toward, yeah, hey, you remember me, don't you? Like, oh, I remember you, and I tell you one thing, and I don't need to be reminded. And then they start wording off a few words, something such as something that happened from a long time ago, and so that's just a thing is to where that for how we want to explain about forgiveness as well. And some that may warrant to where that yeah that can you really forgive that quickly, or over the fact about is to where that anything about to where anybody relate to our enemies, especially any of our enemies that we may think that yeah that they are what you call people that what you call to where that they decide they want to take advantage of you, or that they do something that you thought was not right or so, and something to where it's like that they do something that you're not going to forget, as well. And so that's just the thing about us to where meeting classmates is, re-meeting with classmates, especially with these classmates. And you're like Warren to where, yeah, whenever you can reconnect with somebody that you used to know, and it could have been maybe at the meeting, and you're like, hey, yeah, you remember me, don't you? Yeah, well, we used to work together, like, and yeah, well, what about it? Like, but still, that talks about for like true enemies right here. For anything about true enemies, and we warn to where, why is it? Why is it that for the way we think about it is to where that yeah, that people who that we may call our true enemies, people who take advantage of us, or somebody that I guess the first thing from how it began during the whole part of the story was as to where that they stole something from you, or that they got you in trouble for any reason. And the other one reason could be is to where that you were known as what you call one of the best, until that there was a moment in time to where that the teacher, the student that that set you up, something that went on in the classroom of some sort. So really, what does the Bible say about stuff like this? About anything about romantic, or anything about traumatic ordeals. And the way we think about it is that yeah, that looking through verses of the Bible, and you're like thinking that for how we handle these things and what's the best way of how to handle it. And some they really weren't, to where not really something that we would see on one of those movies as to where that we think necessarily to where that, hurting somebody or somebody else, or if it's anything about what you call is to where, that anything about, for revenge, or if it's anything about, anything such as to where that, pick on me, or you pinch me and I pinch you back, or you hit me and I hit you, or something like that. So that's just a thing, though, is toward that between love and hate, for what the Bible says about that, stuff like that. And talk for like true enemies, though. And if we were to think about this, like have here as an example right here of like any type of homework related to a bill, and you have right here of education forever for message in a bottle, and you have right here for do not disturb. And if anyone weren't to where all these commotions are going on within a certain time or so, and sometimes to where people probably get in that moment to where that they just don't want to be disturbed. They don't want to be distracted by anybody else. They just want to be left alone. And sometimes that kids or maybe adults or so that anything that's going on. Like anything that's going on in their personal life, or anything would say for like anything that's going on in like out in public or so, and sometimes that we think is toward that why is it that maybe people want to be left alone at some point, and you're gonna have maybe people who what you call that that the people that are what you call that your friends and is your best friends or so, and people who are concerned. And so that's just a thing that sometimes that some people that may warrant where that those who are really concerned about me or like somebody, and that you're like warrant or that that just knowing about the show about how much that they care. And you're like warrant or really, I'm like people whenever they look at you and think about whenever they read your letters and read a little bit of details about your person, especially if it's going to be on a profile or some sort message in a bottle, and sometimes that they want to show what you call concern in the matter. What this concern in the matter is like that they read the letters, or that they may read something that's going on maybe in the community or some sort, and that's just a thing is that for knowing about the true enemies, the people that you met at one time that actually stole from you, or that they what you call set you up for any particular reason, or if it's anything about anything, any concerns or any anything that's going to be going on with your case as well, and anything that comes up, and that situations or anything like that. And so that's whenever that it comes to where that there's like a moment to where that you go out to you go out to dinner or go out to the movies or somewhere like that, and then that you wind up meeting up with somebody that you used to know was considered your enemy, and just think about as to where somebody say, well, we really were not ever, we were not enemies, we were just going through our stage. So that's just the thing about us to where do not disturb, and use this right here is to where if it showed any type of meeting to where that for what does it usually mean for do not disturb, and if anybody warns us to where that it's like there's a moment to where hey just leave me alone, I don't want to be bothered right now, or if it's anything about us to where anything that's going on or so, and you're like warned toward the best ways of how to handle it. What does the Bible say about that? But I guess we can maybe say is that, well, the best verse or so is to where try to handle it as best we can, and to think necessarily toward it, that the problems can be solved, and maybe not easily, but they can say that they go what you call they run their courses just like what you call whenever you get sick, but still that for knowing about who's really concerned about for whatever it's going on. So if anybody will warrant toward it, that for anybody that is going to have some source of enemy, if it's going to be somebody that's want to try to steal from you, or that they want to take advantage of you some sort, and for what we call an X, and anybody that may warrant toward EX. The X though is toward it. This right here, shows example right here for like love, and And I know, like, if anybody were coming up to that moment to where you talk about for true enemies, that really that between share and take, the difference between what you call share and take is to where that this person who actually may consider it borrowing compared to what you call just take. So I know that sometimes you're like say is to where people who don't don't like you for any particular reason, who want to steal from you, who think that they had the more power than you, and they actually want to try abuse you and for what you do. And so if we kind of call that what you call the true enemy, or these enemies are so that they you have something that they don't, so they want to go ahead and try what you call try out something else to where that they say is to where they want to consider themselves better than you or that particular person as well. And so that's just the thing about how to describe our true enemies. And that's just the thing about, if we want to call it like for any bullying or so that goes on at the school or work or so, but really think about between love and together, and then for how couples meet. And sometimes at situations that came up from about 10 years ago that come up, and then you're like, yeah, people that somebody that one of your classmates, or could have been, an ex-coworker, a manager that you used to work with, and as somebody who may have fired you from a job, does that basically mean is toward that they are automatically considered your enemy? And I guess what does the Bible say about that? And it's like I would like to say is to where the don't take it is to where that they say that if they really don't care about you, or that they don't like you, they want to continue stealing from you, they want to have overpower against you. And so that's just the thing about it, is to where for how we handle it, to where about our enemies, compared to our allies and our enemies, is that what do we call, like, say, that type of enemy? And they are what you call our enemies there for a while, until what you call that they realize later on is to where that really, can they have all the power themselves, or that it's time for that they need to share, or if it's anything about us, to where if anybody wanted to where how do we handle about our true enemies if they are what you call our true enemies? And the way I drew this right here is to where that if this right here was example right here of a sketch right here talking about for true enemies. And if anybody wanted to where, yeah, true enemies basically means is that, yeah, people who constantly keep stealing from you, and they get you into trouble all the time, and that they want to say that anything you can do, I can do better. And that's just the thing about us, to where that for how to handle situations like that. And then another thing too is to where that we could maybe be talking to our enemies and maybe not even knowing it, or like I say, is to where that you would call pass off information related to your personal life, or so anything that you're doing maybe from a job or so, that people who are what you call maybe considered our enemies, or what you call getting that information. And so that sometimes that some people probably say that you come up to that moment to where that moments that come up, and to where it's kind of what you call shocking at moments, and sometimes embarrassing moments. And I know, especially if you're going to be at the party, if you're going to be at a party or a dinner or gathering anywhere like that, and then there's going to be a moment to where that situation comes up, and to where it kind of puts you like what you call on a stunning moment, is to where that, yeah, that anything that and I know anybody say kind of give some examples, and one of those could be maybe for a relationship, somebody that what you call has been stealing the letters that what you call it, that you wrote some letters to maybe somebody that you had a crush on whenever you were younger, or somebody that you lost connections with back whenever you were younger, or some sort, or somebody that you used to work with, and you wrote a letter to them stating to her that farewell, it was nice working with you. And somebody else that decided, they say that they might say at some point, well, we borrowed it actually, but they were like say, well, actually, we stole it. We stole it because, I tell you one thing, it's not all yours. It's not all yours, it's mine now. Well, since I found it, it's mine. So it comes that situation to where, from what you call our true enemies. true enemies, I guess, come in different shapes and sizes, as well as different moods, as well as different looks as well, for how they see themselves as having power over you or this particular person, and for how did they handle it, as to where for what they're looking for. And somebody say, well, what do you want from me? Necessarily, what do you want? What do you want? Well, what do you need from me? What do you want from me? And like, well, that really our enemies or anybody, it's like for what we call for our bullies, is like, are they going to give you like any particular answer, or are they just going to say is to where nothing? I'm just want to say is get one thing straight. And so if anybody will warrant or that, yeah, that one thing that maybe our enemies or people who are what you call a concern in the matter, and you're like warrant or that there's going to be like maybe a particular time. And every time I think about this, it's going to maybe remind me of what you call like a superhero, type comic. But talking about, for like anybody saying that if you're going to have enemies, they're more likely they may not even be after what you call it necessarily the work. That more likely they're going to probably say, we want to talk to the person who did that work, who managed to work, and talk to them. It's like to where anything that they want that maybe that you have. And so that's just the thing about it, to where if anybody that may warrant, to where anything that was typed on a letter, anything about what you call professional work. And why do we think that maybe our enemies that will be going after the briefcase whenever that they would maybe, what you call their first, what you call, if you want to maybe kind of call it target, but their first agenda would be is toward it, the search for the person who actually put that briefcase together, and actually look at the work, talk to the person who did the work especially. So that's just a thing about it, to where that anything that a particular student, and I know if anybody wants to, that our enemies, that and I always also think about if I want to talk about anything about maybe weapons, and I know that with any kind of weapons that include those in my drawings, but really, I don't think, really, does the Bible say anything about weapons? Because that's just a thing as to where that, for most of our enemies, I guess, more about the power, and as well as for how that they think of themselves, as for how well that they're educated, and as how well as that they are, for how that they want to learn, for from who they are and what they speak of, or so. So it could be a variety of things, but one of those things will be is to where that, yeah, that for who's willing to support you, and who's willing to show how much they care about, as to where if you're going to have a problem going on at work or school, wherever, and think about those people who are worried about you compared to which cause like for the enemies, and people who would say that they take advantage of you, and people who are non-trusted. And some may say that this sounds a lot like, which says like a computer hacker. And what does the Bible say about computer hackers necessarily? I say, well, you don't have control over what they do, except the fact about your own personal computer. You have the security settings, but still, that for the best ways of how to handle that about computer hackers. And computer hackers, I guess, do we kind of call them maybe a little bit like germs or bacteria? Anyway, I say that, yeah, they're about almost everywhere. Lysol and maybe disinfectant is not going to stop all of them. So what's the next agenda? It's like saying, well, making sure that you have your information protected. But on your hand, talk about for like true enemies. So I know that, like with anybody, that for anybody that we may run into our exes at some point, if it's going to be maybe been an ex as somebody that you used to know at some point, and you may say is to her, hey, we never were enemies. We were just going through our stages. We worked with each other at one time, and we would just like to know. 7 years later, we've just been wondering about what's been going on. We still like you, even though that we had talked to each other like if we were what you call enemies or bullies at some point. So you're like Warren toward that. What's the best ways of how to handle that about forgiveness? About as to where whenever we run into it, whenever we reconnect with people that we used to know, and then the first thing that we may, that may come to our immediate attention is about that they start talking about the past, and a lot of that stuff about the past that a lot of people will probably say that they feel very angry about. a lot of anger that could be related to is to where that yeah that that they got you in trouble for some reason, or that if anything else situation that came up as well. And so that's why that it says to where that maybe not all ex-classmates are what you call your enemies, that what you call people who are willing to show how much love and support that they are willing to give to one another. And so how do we think about that, as to where that whenever we come at this situation to where that whenever that people that they may have met at one time, and they may say this to her that yeah, while you were sleeping, that this is what's been going on, maybe something that you don't like, and if you don't like it, that's too bad. And the other concern in the matter could be is to her that yeah, that if you don't mind, but I took this, it's like, if you don't mind, like, and well, you need to know about it, ask my permission first. So if anybody warrant to it, they come at the situation toward it, that what do we call it, the difference between take and borrow, and what you call even exchange or something like that. For anything about even, and I know that if anybody say that, for how we consider ourselves even, and does the Bible talk about a lot of stuff, and for how we handle it especially, but for like talk about for true enemies, and they may say, other than what you call anything related to like what you call any bullies or so at school, but still that for like anything about together. And I know that a lot of these sketches right here are going to remind me of the video games. I talk about for like besides Mortal Kombat as well as Street Fighter, you're going to have these people who are what you call considered maybe enemies, but how did they become friends later on? They may see as to where they realize as to where that really that for how are these people what you call considered what you call your friends later on? And sometimes some people may say whenever they grow up and then they become more mature enough to understand your full story and really respect the rights as to where, hey, you're not so bad, but still, for I guess there may be a number of stories about how we can explain about as to where bullies of people who you knew at one time who were what you call as to where that they were kind of what you call they were considered your enemies until that they what you call were become they became people who were to cause were more supportive. They were much more supportive, much more mature. And does it take 15, 20 years for this to happen? Or does it basically take us to where that, yeah, that to where to show that, the respect of honesty, and as well as the truth meanings about as to where in order to be able to get for what you want, that you just really have to show as to where for coming up to agreement. And it's like the statements to where what, if you really want to know a little bit more about that and understand a little bit more about me, you can just ask, ask to borrow it, and if anything like warrant, or if anybody say that, yeah, that if anybody warrants as to where not really about your belongings, but mainly if it's going to be maybe your lunch money or anything like that, or maybe that you brought something to school that meant a lot to you, a journal or anything like that, maybe a notebook, and you're going to have somebody that's going to take it. And I know, like with me though, that at times it ran into problems like that to school too. And that's whenever that maybe a lot of fights that come around as to where that they take something from you and they say that nobody gave them that right to take it. So that's just a thing about as to where that whenever people take, does that mean that they are what you call they don't care about your respect, that they say as to where it's mine now since I found it, or that they are just what you call curious and know about as to where about that particular person. And sometimes it may be what you call, if you want to call it miracle, to where that after they meet up with you several years later or several weeks later, and then they return for what they borrowed or what they take, and they say, then they apologize too. And I know, like what anybody says, they're trying to come up with a settlement about how to handle the situation about between love and together, from meet together as we meet, and as well as for ex-classmates. I talk about for true enemies. But other than that, Matthew, Matthew made 25, Matthew 31. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.